Hi, this is Matt Burns from the University of Missouri. And with me today, I have Kirsty Walter, who is a demonstrator at University College of London Oxford Brookes University, finishing her PhD at University College of London. Thanks for being here. Really appreciate it.
Hi, Matt. Thanks for having me. It's really good to be here.
So today we're going to talk about a study she did. Let me share my screen so I can show it to you. All right. So this is a study, this is a study that I found really easily in Google Scholar, in Reading and Writing, which is a really good journal, a sentence combining intervention for struggling readers, response to intervention, an intervention study focusing on writing that looked at sentence combining. Like I said, I had no problem getting it through Google Scholar. So let me unshare my screen now. All right, so again, we're just going to ask a few questions about it, have a brief conversation about it. Let's start with, if you don't mind, please tell us about the intervention that you did.
So the intervention that I've done is a sentence combining intervention. So I basically just taught the children how to flexibly combine two or more really simple sentences into one more complex sentence. Okay. So for example, we've got a sentence, the cat is black, and we've got the sentence, the cat jumped. And what we want to try and do is to be able to combine those two sentences and make them into one. And inevitably, that's just going to be a more complex sentence. And normally in children, you'd probably get sentences like the black cat, the cat is black and it jumped. Or you might even just get, for particularly a struggling writer or somebody who struggles with oral language, they may just add the word and. So they'd just say the cat is black and the cat jumped. But what we're actually looking for is for them to be able to say the black cat jumped. And so I started off really simple. We just started off with those two sentences. And to start with, I just taught them how to identify the key words in the sentence that they need to keep the same, so that the meaning of the new sentence is the same, because that's really important. You don't want to be changing the meaning of these sentences. And then the next session, they'd have a go at that skill. And instead of using it on two sentences, they'd try it on three. And then as we worked on, we started introducing new strategies for the children to learn. So we'd try and help keep the strategy that they've learned the week before, but then they would learn a new strategy. And so they were taught things like how to use different connectives, or other than and, or how to add an affix to a word. So they could move it around and put it in a different place in the sentence. And then they'd have some time in the groups to work on it together. They'd get feedback both from their peers, but also from me. And then at the end, they'd normally have a chance to just do it independently and have a go at using the skills on their own and to write and combine their own sentences. And the last two sessions of the intervention were about deconstructing a whole paragraph and then putting it back together using everything that they'd learned. Oh. And this was compared to a spelling intervention and then to a waiting list control group. And the kids had 2 sessions a week for 8 weeks.
Cool. How long was each session, roughly?
So each session was about 25 minutes.
Okay, gotcha.
So we had kind of like a few minutes to recap and then some activities and then 5 minutes to just kind of remind them what they'd learned in that session.
Awesome. Sounds great. So pretty quick, easy intervention.
Yeah, really easy. It's all based off of the work of Bruce Sadler over at University of Albany. He's done quite a lot of work in sentence combining, but I adapted it for the sample and for being over here in the UK.
Okay, sure, of course. So tell us about how you studied it. What were some of your measures and et cetera?
Yeah, so I was particularly interested in struggling writers. So I didn't want a clinical sample. I was really interested in those who are just starting to fall behind in their writing. So what I did was, the first measure was I screened using a literacy measure looking at both reading and writing, but particularly focused on writing for this. So they had to write a story, and then they had to write a letter based off of the story that they'd read in the test. And I looked at those children who were performing in the bottom 20% of their cohort at their school. And this was also confirmed with the fact that they hadn't achieved the expected level of attainment on national standards, and their teachers said that they were struggling. So I ended up with 71 children who I would count as struggling writers, and they were aged 8 to 10. So I think over in the States, that's for 3rd and 4th grade. Mm-hmm. And we split them into 3 groups. So I had the 2 intervention groups and the control group. And I was particularly also interested in wanting to answer kind of why children do or do not respond to particular interventions, because we know that actually some children persistently don't seem to respond to the interventions. And I think that knowing this information can really help teachers and practitioners ensure they're giving the kids the interventions that they're most likely to benefit from. And as you're probably aware, that oral language and reading are really closely associated with children's writing. So before the intervention, I took measures of their oral expression and their listening comprehension based off of the Wyatt, but UK standardized samples, and then also their single word reading ability from something called the British Ability Scales. So that was kind of the pre-test information about the children's unique profiles. And then for the intervention, before the intervention, immediately after, and then a 3-month follow-up, I did a whole host of different measures. So obviously the main one was focusing on their sentence combining, because you want to know if the intervention's actually done what you think it's going to do. And then also their single word spelling. And then to explore the impact of the intervention on their writing more generally. The kids also did what's called a curriculum-based measures task. So I gave them 5 minutes to write a story about something that they knew really well. So there was no issue about their knowledge behind the scenes. So things like, one day I had the best weekend ever. And I scored this for both compositional quality, so how good is the actual story, and then a whole host of other CBM measures, so accuracy ones, like the proportion of correct word sequences or the proportion of words spelled correctly, and then productivity measures like total words written, or how many words did they put in complete sentences. And then these scripts were also scored for lexical diversity, so just how many different words did they use.
Cool, that sounds great. And what did you find?
Yeah, so I guess reassuringly, I found that the kids in the sentence combining intervention did show greater gains than those in both the spelling intervention and the control group. And just, I can't remember if I said it already, but the control group didn't have any teaching at all. They just had their normal classroom teaching. And then the differences between the sentence combining kids, who I called the wiggly worms, and the control group was still there at the 3-month follow-up, which was brilliant. And these were pretty large effect sizes for this. And then what I think is really interesting is that I took this a step further with this measure, and I looked at the influence of the children's oral language and reading ability. So that's the listening comprehension, the oral expression, reading, and also their spelling, on how they responded to that sentence combining intervention, both immediately after and at the 3-month follow-up. And immediately after the intervention, those with lower sentence combining scores at pre-test, poorer reading, and better spelling showed the greatest improvements. And also, again, those in the sentence combining group showed the greatest gains, but we knew that one already. And then at the 3-month follow-up, there was a shift in the relationships, where actually instead of single word reading, it was listening comprehension. So those with better listening comprehension showed greater improvements. And then, although mostly not significant, I did find some interesting effect sizes, so moderate to large effect sizes, with children's compositional quality and the proportion of correct word sequences. So for both of these, those in the sentence combining group showed a good effect size in comparison to the control group, but this wasn't enough to reach significance. So either I just didn't have enough kids in the intervention, or the interventions weren't long enough. And there weren't any significant results for productivity. And then the last thing to kind of think about is actually the lexical diversity measure was really quite interesting. So the spelling group showed some improvements that didn't quite reach significance again with the lexical diversity measure in relation to the control group. And this was a really, really large effect size. And there was a moderate effect size for the sentence combining group and the control group on the lexical diversity measure. So there is something happening in their writing, but it wasn't enough to reach significance.
Gotcha. So you saw main effects on the dependent variable that most aligned to the intervention, but some carryover effects on other types of reading and writing measures as well. That's cool. And there are certain kids for whom the intervention was more effective.
Yeah, there definitely were. And I think that's, I think that's really important for teachers, but also as we go forward in intervention research to start thinking about these things.
Absolutely. Great. So when you finished this, was there something that surprised you, or is this consistent with the previous literature?
I was quite surprised I didn't get the results I got the effect sizes, but I didn't get the significance for general writing, so that they didn't get better on their story quality. And then the lexical diversity really surprised me, because the children didn't improve on their spelling ability. There wasn't this general application to their writing, but there was still something happening.
Mhm.
And I think this might have been to do with their confidence. And how much do I wish I'd measured children's confidence and motivation to write? It's one of my measures.
That'd be cool.
But because there is some evidence that suggests like poor spellers tend to avoid words they don't know how to spell, which would then lead to that reduced lexical diversity. So it might be that they felt more confident. And again, with the sentence combining measure, they were taught new connectives. So that may have helped improve their lexical diversity.
Yeah. So you've got good evidence to get more funding to do a larger scaled study to get significance and measure confidence as well.
That'd be amazing. I think we might have a bit of a difficulty with the pandemic getting into schools, but yeah, it would be fantastic.
In the future. Great, thank you. So this is science. I always want to remind people of the limitations of science. What's one limitation of the study design that I would like you to highlight, please?
Yeah, so the main one that I really think I should highlight, obviously I've already kind of mentioned sample size and length, is actually the sentence combining measure. Next time I do this, I'm definitely going to use a longer sentence combining measure, because the one that I used only had 5 sentences in it. So the children they were really limited in their ability to demonstrate growth.
Cool. Sounds like a great study though. Turned out really well. Great.
Yeah, it was good.
Congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thanks again. I really appreciate it. This is a nice study. I enjoyed the conversation. Thanks so much.